Thank you. So, how many of you were here last fall when I did this first opening thing about communication? There's a few of you there. Good. Okay. So this is sort of continuing on, but in order to do that, we'll just take a couple of steps back and go through some of the material so that we can catch the rest of you up. And today we're going to do a very structured dialogue. And the reason it's so structured is that it is especially designed to help you regulate your brain, your reactive brain, in order to stay present for your partner. So we're going to use the skills, we're going to go through them, and then we're going to get you right into it. So no group discussion today, but rather couples work together. If you're someone here without a partner, without your spouse, then we want to pair you up because you can do the exercise even if it's not with your spouse. So keep that in mind as we get forward. So going forward, the idea today is about how to turn conflicts into deeper connections with each other. And we asked the question last time, why do couples fight? And I declared that the couples fight for one reason is an objection to difference. It's an unconscious thing that happens when our partner shows up different from what our projection is, what we think. And there's this reaction when that happens. That's where it begins. But there's another reason I want to talk about and deal with today, and that is couples fight when they feel disconnected and don't like it. So this is on page 3. We're going to skip over page 2 and go to page 3. Couples fight when they feel disconnected and don't like it. So when you feel connected in your relationship, everything works. What happens is when you feel this connection, by the way, we're connected whether or not we feel it. When God performed that first wedding ceremony in the Garden of Eden, He declared the two shall become one flesh. So we are connected, but sometimes we don't feel it. When we feel disconnected, nothing works. But when we're feeling that connection, when the space between us is safe, and you're vulnerable and open, and you connect emotionally, everything works. Problem solving is not a big problem. Conflict resolution can happen. You still have to do those things, but it's relatively easy when you feel connected. Why? Because your brain is pumping all of the wonderful neurochemicals that make you feel fully alive and passionate. And it's just a result of feeling connected, of feeling that connection. But when you feel disconnected, nothing works. Okay, nothing works. And so what happens is your brain stops triggering, your lower brain stops triggering the neurochemicals that bring pleasure and connection and feelings of warmth, and starts triggering this neurochemical called cortisol, which makes us feel anxious and we feel stressed. And when we feel anxious, the anxiety fills the space between you. And it can be not necessarily a harsh word of criticism. It can just be a rolling of the eyes or some kind of body language, but it produces negativity in the space between us. There's a reaction, cortisol happens, and we feel anxious. And that's when our unconscious defenses are activated. And you say, well, and those unconscious defenses come from the past, from things that happen, unmet needs in our childhood, frustrations we had growing up, wounds that took place when our parents were either not available at times when we needed them, or they were intrusive and too available. They were intrusive and controlling. Those kinds of wounds took place, and we learned to respond and we learned how to react and try to keep ourselves, or just to survive that. And that's the same behavior we do when our partner triggers that same thing, when our unconscious defenses are activated. And then that results in further feelings of disconnection, and of course efforts to fix it only make it worse. Why? Because we're talking about things that are surface issues rather than the fundamental issue is I feel disconnected with you and I don't like it, and I'm trying to get that connection back. But when I criticize or when I judge you or when I walk out of the room when you're talking, those tactics don't work, get connection. But somehow our lower brain thinks if I just beat you up enough, maybe you'll go back to where you were and you'll change and you'll connect with me, and it doesn't work. So the fill in the blank for the next one is the anxiety of disconnection results in what we call symbiosis. Symbiosis is where we are in a relationship, but I have completely, because I'm not connected with you, I'm not empathetic with you, and I've lost sight of you. And so my only reality that I see is my own internal world. And so I take that internal world and I project it on you. And I think my world should be like your world, but that's what we call symbiosis. It's what we call a place of real, and especially when we're in pain in the relationship, when we've been hurt. We get triggered in this self-absorption. It's like if I were walking down to the beach and it was a beautiful day, but all of a sudden I tripped and stubbed my toe on and cut my foot on a big shell. All of a sudden, the beauty of all that day just dissolves, and I can feel nothing but pain. And that's what happens in relationships. We lose sight of our partner because of the pain, and we become self-absorbed. You ever felt like your partner was self-absorbed? They could only see their reality. They couldn't see your reality? Well, don't raise your hand, okay? Because even if you did raise your hand, guess what your partner feels? Because it goes both ways. Two people are self-absorbed. I can't see your reality. You can't see my reality. So the symbiosis is the unconscious assumption that other people share your subjective feelings, thoughts, and realities. And what we say is, you and I are one, and I'm the one. That's why we go into marriage in the romantic stage. You and I are one, and I'm the one. Romantic love is all about me, right? And so we have this rude awakening after that. And so there's a couple of examples I shared with you. I shared this last time. I'm just going to do it again for those of you who weren't here. You say, well, there's only one way to load the dishwasher, right? There's my way and there's the wrong way, right? She says, make sure when you load the dishwasher, you face the dishes inward, put all the silverware sorted in the tray, and don't turn it on until it's full so we don't waste energy. He says, it doesn't really matter which way they're facing. They'll get clean either way. And just put the silverware in there. We can sort it when we put it away. And it really doesn't use that much energy. And so what does that leave her feeling like? You never listened to me. And what does he feel? You're always telling me what to do. And so the word never, always, that comes into play. Never works. Because we're making assumptions and we're basically looking at the person's reality and not seeing it. We're seeing our reality. So when we're feeling disconnected, if you try to fix the problem by talking about the problem, you'll never fix the problem. If you're arguing about, who's not cleaning up after themselves, or who's not helping with the kids, those kinds of things, you're dealing with symptoms. And so you have to look deeper, because underneath those symptoms is that deeper issue. I don't feel connected with you, and I don't like it. Okay? Some stories I told last time we're going to skip. And there's a video. We don't have time to show it today. But if you go to chuckstarnes.com, my website, and go to the tab that says videos, it's the first one on there. It's a story about a couple, Rob and Jan, and how they learned this idea of being safe, of making safety for a conversation, okay? So, and there's a fill in the blanks on your workbook page 5. You can actually, that's an assignment. Go to my website, watch the video, and do the fill in the blanks, and then discuss it with your spouse later. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to try to shift the culture of marriage. We come from a culture in our world today of monologue. Whether it's at work, whether it's in school, or whether it's in whatever the community, usually monologue is the culture. In other words, I'm talking and you listen, right? And so, but the problem with that it creates inequality, a feeling of inequality, and it creates anxiety. And someone can be talking and talking and talking, and then you realize, I'm not really listening to you. What I'm doing, I'm waiting for my turn to talk and share my opinion. So I'm not really listening. So monologue culture. We want to move from that to a dialogue culture where dialogue immediately creates equality. Now, I believe in the Bible, and I believe in roles. We have roles for the family, husband and wife. If the Bible says it, I believe it. But Peter says, he says, husbands, live in an understanding way with your wives. And he talks about them being fellow heirs of the grace of life, equal partners. Different roles, but equal partners. So dialogue creates a feeling of equality. And so we're going to use this, we're going to do this now. I've got 3 minutes to get going on a demonstration and instruct you on how to do it. So there's 3 parts to this safe conversation model that we're going to use. Now let me just say, this was developed over a period of 30 years. So every little sentence stem that we use, every part of it, I want you to use it with orthodoxy. We learned about orthodoxy today in orthopraxy, right? I want you to use it with both orthodoxy and orthopraxy. And I want you to not variate it at all. And I'll show you what I mean. The first step is what we call mirroring. And mirroring is what we did when we had that first class last fall. You learned to share an appreciation using the mirroring process. And here are the sentence stems that you'll use. When your partner says something, they get to a point, if they don't stop, you can raise your hand and say, let me see if I got you so far. Let me see if I got you. If I got you, you said, and then you repeat back to them what they said. It could be word for word or paraphrase. It doesn't matter unless it matters to your partner. Some partners want to be mirrored word for word. Some partners, that bugs them to death. They just want you to paraphrase. And so you'll find out how your partner wants to be mirrored, but you just say, did I get it? After that, let me see if I got you. You say it back. And then there's a safety valve. Did I get it? You check for accuracy. And then your partner says yes or no. And if you didn't get it all, she'll say, or he'll say, I said that, yes, and I also said, and then add to it. And then mirror that. So you also said, so that way you're really, really working on it, focusing on it, very structured way, just listening. Now what happens when you use these sentence stems is your brain immediately shifts from a reactive place to the upper part of your brain where you can be present without reaction. You know, you walk in the door and you say, your wife says, why do you always leave your stuff, and you don't ever clean up after yourself. And so if I say, let me see if I got you. You said, you asked me why what am I doing? I'm now in this part of my brain. Rather than, oh, you think I'm dirty and sloppy. What about instead of reacting, I can stay in this part of my brain to be present. So that's what these sentence stems will do for it. And it helps you build new brain pathways, not of reactivity, but of being present. The second step, after you mirror, you're going to summarize. Don't let that scare you because it's not a memory contest. You're just getting what you got. And you're telling your partner because you're listening, you're getting what you got, and then you're saying, did I get it? And then you use that wonderful stem, is there more about that? When you say to your partner, is there more about that? What that does, it turns a switch on called curiosity. You say, well, she's criticizing me right now. I'm not even curious about when you say, is there more about that? It's actually your brain will follow your intentional actions. And if you say, I'm curious, is there more about that? Then she'll feel safe, you'll feel curious, and the space between you will be safe enough to go deeper. Okay, so then the next step is validation. You're going to say, the first one is mirroring, where you repeat what he said, she said. Then validation says simply, you make sense. And what makes sense about it is, and you tell them. And when you say that, it's not you make sense from my perspective, it's from your perspective. You can even say this, I may disagree with you, but you make sense. I can see you make sense, and here's what makes sense about your own internal logic. See, validation is what helps you start the differentiation process, where you can be different and be in the same space without reacting to each other. And then finally, empathy. Empathy is where you simply say, I imagine you might be feeling, are those the feelings? Okay. I imagine you might be feeling scared. I can see where you could really feel angry. I can imagine you're feeling angry right now. Are those the feelings? Are there more feelings? And you continue until your partner shares everything. So those are the 3 parts. Memorize that. You don't have to because you have a sheet coming up. Mirroring, validating, and empathizing. Okay? So, let me just give you the bullet points under mirroring. Mirroring simply says, when you do this for your partner, what it says to your partner is, you matter. And what you have to say matters. My wife and I have developed a culture where when she says, is this a good time to talk about, that's a signal for me to put my phone down and go into mirroring mode. Why? Because when I do that, it says you matter. And what you have to say matters. Everything you have to say matters. And I want to hear it all. And mirroring also, we know that two people hear on average about 30% of what the other person's saying. Why? Because I'm not listening to you, I'm recharging. I'm listening to me. You've said something that triggered my thoughts. Now I'm no longer listening. So what we do is we cut that. We completely disrupt that process, and we hear 100%. So validation says it's a temporary suspension of your own, or transcendence of your own point of view that allows your partner to experience. To have partner's experience to have its own reality, to be valid in the space. And so it says you make sense, and what makes sense is, and then although, as I said, you might see it differently, but you can see how your partner makes sense. The good example is one person sitting looking at the floor at a 6, and the other person on the other side is looking at a 9, and you're arguing over it. And you're arguing, and you finally, somebody gets up and walks to the other side and looks and says, oh, although I may see it differently, you make sense. And what makes sense is, and you're seeing your partner's perspective. It makes sense that it would be a 9. I can see that. And so the conflict shifts from you versus me to you hear me, and then you help this person that's talking come out of their entrenchment. Because if you don't validate me, I'm going to naturally, my brain's going to become more entrenched with my opinion. But if you validate me, I can loosen up on that. And I might even be able to see your perspective. Actually, I will. And that's the point. So it dissolves the power struggle, and it makes the space for two separate realities and identities to connect. And then finally, empathy is the human yearning that we all have, and it's meeting in the space between. It is walking into another person's world and feeling what they're feeling, and then you tell them you imagine what they're feeling. Not that you can ever feel what they're feeling, but you can imagine, and then it creates connection across difference through shared, understood feeling. And the beautiful thing is that when you're empathizing with someone, you cannot abuse them or hurt them. It is impossible. It's when we have this symbiosis, and my reality is my reality. I don't see your reality. And when we disconnect and we have this polarization, and I no longer empathize with you, I can treat you any way I want. I can berate you. I can criticize you. I can walk out of the room while you're talking to me. Why? Because you're no longer a human being. So empathy helps us get to that point to where I had no idea what you were going through. And now that I see you, and there's safety and there's connection. Okay, so let's get going. Here's the dialogue. This is the one you're going to use. You'll see it there on page 6. And we're going to share a frustration today. And I wanted to say frustrations are actually wishes in disguise. Buried in every frustration is something you're desiring, but you're not able to really get in touch with and ask for. But it can be expressed in a safe conversation. And so here's what you're going to do. You're going to begin with an appreciation. And you're going to, the sentence stem is, one thing I appreciate about you is, and you can talk about something they did for you. I appreciate you made me coffee this morning. Something about the way, I appreciate the way you're wearing your hair today. Or I appreciate the way you are with our children. Anything that you appreciate, just share that. And then you're going to tell what happened. It was frustrating when I came home last night and all the dishes were over the sink and nothing was cleaned up. And tell how you felt. When that happened, I felt angry. I felt alone, like I'm the only one that cares about stuff like that around here. And then you make a connection with childhood. And that feeling of being alone reminds me of when I was growing up. And my siblings all ditched their responsibility, and I was left with all the cleanup and the chores, you see. And so then I'm able to share that, and it goes way back further than just the present. And then you uncover a hidden fear. What I'm really afraid of is that nobody will ever see that feeling that I have of loneliness. And then you might even talk about what you did in response. So what I did is I went to my room, I closed the door, and I shut everybody out for the next 24 hours. Or I blew up in front of our friends. Okay, so examples are, when you passed by me at the party without speaking, I felt abandoned, like when I was little and came home from school to an empty house, so I pulled away and didn't speak to you for a whole day. That's what it would look like if you were to summarize it. When you rolled your eyes at me because I couldn't figure out how to use my phone, I felt belittled and angry, like when I was the kid's sister, never as smart as my brothers, so I blew up in front of our friends. Or when you insisted that I fix the fence, I felt like nothing I ever do is good enough, like when I was growing up and could never please my dad. So I went into the garage and spent the whole day doing something else. You see the fighting styles between the hailstorm and the turtle? There's one that expresses and explodes outwardly. There's the other one that contracts and pulls in and goes into the shell. How many of you are married to a turtle? Okay, how many of you are married to a hailstorm? Okay, those are two different ways. How many are married to both? So simple way to start. If you're having trouble with this, just say, here's what happened and here's what I felt. Talk about the facts, but here's what I felt. And just start there and see where it goes. Okay? So for the one talking, always use I language. Notice how the stems are, when that happened, I felt, rather than, why do you always mess up everything around the house and never clean up after yourself? Let's talk about what I feel, not what you did. And send all information respectfully with a kind tone of voice. Be succinct and never, ever, ever shame. Okay? And ask for what you want rather than tell your partner what not to do or what they're doing wrong. So, okay, for the one listening, you're just simply going to... Yes? Silence. Okay, there we go. So try to put your perspective in the corner. The first thing that happens when my wife, even when she asks for the appointment to share a frustration, I'm defensive. Because I've got 3 reasons why that's not right. Take that, put it in the corner for now, and then use this part of your brain just to mirror. Mirroring is not understanding. It's not agreeing. It's just simply being a flat mirror. It's not fixing and listening and reflecting back. And to remember to be curious, accepting, non-judgmental, and always ask, is there more, with real curiosity. And remember, your feelings always follow your intentional reactions. So when you direct your brain to use these skills, you will be present. Your wife, your husband will feel that. Because what you focus on is what you get. Now, another tip is when your partner goes on and on and on, raise your hand. Don't put it over their mouth, but just raise their hand and say, can I mirror what you just said so far? All right. All right. So decide who goes first and then ask for the appointment. Why do we ask for the appointment? It's a boundary issue. Say, is this a good time to share an appreciation? Is this a good time to share a frustration? Is this a good time to talk about what happened last night? Ask permission. And that way your partner can say yes or no. If it's not a good time, they can say it. But then they tell you when is a good time. And by the way, you go looking for your partner after that time comes. So that one person's not chasing the other around the house trying to get a conversation. Can you relate? All right. So that respects boundaries. And then secondly, make eye contact. Move from the glare to the gaze. Okay? Because you know that your lower brain can read the pupils of your partner. And your partner's lower brain sees your pupils. If they're in a shrunken state, the brain's saying danger, danger already without any. But if they're soft and dilated, your brain relaxes and feels safer just in that. Okay. All right. So then take 3 deep breaths. Always good to take breaths in sync before we do it. Okay, so now let's demonstrate it. Here's the dialogue. Turn over to page 6. Is it? Yes. Page 6. And let's have an outgoing couple that is not afraid to be a little vulnerable in front of everybody. And we're going to ask you to come up here and quickly demonstrate this. We don't have much time here. We got to get going. Maybe we're going to make it quick. But let's have a couple that's willing to share a real frustration that I had, and we'll show you how it works. To go. All right, Dan, come on up, Dan. All right, so grab the microphones there. And so we have Dan and Kelly. That's right. Dan and Kelly. And so who has the frustration? Who would like to start? Okay, so Kelly, so what you would do is you'd say, Dan, is this a good time to share a frustration?
Dan, is this a good time to share a frustration? Yes. He's like, I don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and first I'd like to share an appreciation. We'll take a few deep breaths.
Together.
Okay, first I'd like to share an appreciation.
Okay, first I'd like to share an appreciation. I want to thank you for listening to me as we check in every night and you ask me how I'm feeling, how I'm doing. You do it not from a defensive place, even if I'm angry. I appreciate that so much about you.
Thank you. So let me see if I got you. You appreciate that I'm there so we can check in and talk about what's been going on and how our feelings are affecting each other and what's going on in our heart.
Right.
Okay. Did I get it right?
You got it.
Okay.
So make sure you don't say right. The word right is a judgmental term, and your brain is very sensitive to that. And so say, did I get it? Did I get you, or did I get it?
All right. Did I get it?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that's the appreciation. Now, one thing that frustrated me, or I was frustrated when?
So it was frustrating this morning when I was feeling there was something off with me about my mom that I was hurting about. And I knew that you would be really helpful as a sounding board. And so I wanted to talk to you about it. But you had something else on your mind that we were focused on and just kind of left me sitting there.
Let me see if I got you.
So let me see if I got this right. So you wanted to talk to me about an issue with your mom, and I wasn't giving you the time that you wanted.
Right.
Okay.
Did I get it?
Did I get it?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there more about that?
Is there any more about that?
So let the more be. When I experienced that, I felt.
So when I experienced that, I remembered being a young teenager, junior high age, and really having something hurting me, and needing my mom, and her not being there for me.
Okay. So let me see if I have this right. So because I was focused on something else and wasn't there for you, it kind of made you feel like I didn't have time for you. And it kind of brought back some old relationship that you had with your mom, correct? Did I get it right?
That's right. That's
okay.
Correct.
Yeah. Is there any more about that?
I'll let the more be. What I'm really afraid of is
I think what I'm really afraid of is not trusting you and withdrawing because I'm that turtle.
Okay, that makes sense. So what I'm hearing you saying is that my behavior or the lack of my attention to what you want to talk about kind of brings those things up. And it might force you to withdraw, and that that is a fear for you. Did I get that right?
That's correct, and that's a pattern that I don't want to continue. We've worked through that so much. I don't want to. So that's the fear that's behind that. Yeah.
Okay, I can imagine how you feel.
So first summarize. First, we want you to summarize. Just give a brief summary of what she said.
Just now.
Mm-hmm. The whole thing.
The whole thing. So you're wanting to talk to me about your mom and the issues that you had, and I didn't have that time for you at that moment, is making you fearful that you will fall into that place, or we will, as a couple, fall in that place where we're not spending time and attention to each other that we need to have so we know what's on our heart. Did I get that?
Is that a good summary? Is that a good summary?
Yeah, is that a pretty good summary of?
Yeah, and I think that it's even more about not like, I know I can trust you and lean into you, but I don't always do that, and it's more about me falling back into old patterns of avoiding, and that I think it was more just about not even me copping out.
Yeah. So I understand what you're saying now. So it's more of a fear for how you would react to that and how that affects our relationship.
Yeah.
When I behave that way or I respond that way. Did I get that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so now validation says, Kelly, you make sense. And what makes sense is, tell her, say that to her.
The whole thing?
Yes.
Validation?
No, so Kelly, you make sense.
Okay.
And what makes sense is?
Okay, you make sense. So am I supposed to follow up with another summary or what?
No, and what makes sense. Tell her what makes sense about what she said, the logic.
So what makes sense is that what you described, I understand what you're saying, and it makes sense that I don't want to put myself in a place where you pull back and we don't have that connection.
Is that a good validation?
Is that a good validation?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So now empathy says, I can imagine you feel.
Okay, I can imagine how you feel.
And that is?
And that's a fear that you would have, that that my behavior and how I react will put you in a place where you just pull back and you're hurt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did I get it right? Are those the feelings?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there more feelings?
Is there anything else?
Feeling a lot of gratitude right now.
Oh, good.
For you. And that I appreciate that I can lean on you when I need you to help me through things.
I appreciate a lot of gratitude about you, and that I can do this in front of the whole world. This is awesome. Let's give him a hand, all right? Stand up and give a 1 minute full body hug in front of everybody, okay? Yeah. All right. So 1 full minute of and the reason is we are wired for touch. It's not just nice, it's necessary. And when you give a full body hug for 20 seconds, there's a release of this wonderful neurochemical called oxytocin. And if you hug for another 20 seconds, there's another release. So get 2 free drugs, okay? And it just feels good. Thank you so much. Let's give them another hand. Dan and Kelly, you were awesome. So you see right there in front of the whole world, Kelly went through an emotionally corrective experience where she was able to just really find healing even in that moment of someone seeing and understanding and getting it. And you can actually add a change request to that dialogue where you can ask for change. But many times you don't have to, because when it happens, the shift happens, and you just naturally are there for each other after that. Thank you, guys. That was amazing. Okay, so now you have 20 minutes, 10 minutes each side. I want you to face your chairs just like this. Knee to knee, eyeball to eyeball, turn around, and take a few deep breaths, or ask for the appointment. Decide who goes first, and ask for the appointment. Is this a good time? Take some breaths and go. You have 20 minutes. Let's have some feedback. Tell me, what was that experience like for you? What was the experience? Because this is, yes, you're building new brain pathways. You're learning a skill. For some of you, it was probably very structured. You feel very, very confining. Some of you probably went off the track and you did something rather than what I asked. But what was the experience like for you? Graham has a mic over there, so I have a mic over here. So who would like to share? What was your experience? Positive, negative? What did you experience? What was it like?
Karen?
I think that for me, I can only speak for myself, but I felt a deeper level of connection. A deeper level of connection with my husband. Eye contact is critical. And in general, when we speak, he has a tendency to look down, and I want to look into his eyes. So during this conversation, we actually had that eye contact, which was huge in the connection process of, just communicating what our needs are.
Wonderful. It's so. Thank you for sharing that. Oftentimes it's one of the things that matters. Like she just said, it was the eye contact that helped me. One person last week in a workshop I did said it was the asking for the appointment. I never thought of that. It helps me. Yes.
Hi. For me, I really appreciated. My husband doesn't share a lot, so I really appreciated learning about his feelings a little more. So yes. I'm grateful for that.
So she appreciated learning about his feelings? Yes. Now, so if you're a turtle like me and like maybe some other husbands in the room, we don't share a lot of our feelings. We just don't feel. But the safe conversation, when someone's saying, let me see if I got you, and they're repeating back what I said, and then they say, did I get it? Is there more about that? Suddenly I feel safe. What happens when you feel safe? Feelings you never felt come up. Thoughts you never thought come up. All of a sudden, a guy who says, I'm not a feelings person, has got all kinds of emotions that are being shared. And he married someone who needs that. I'm not saying you did, but usually, when you're not an emotional person, you're not used to sharing your emotions, God will put you with someone who needs you to do that. Why? So you can grow into that. But the safe conversation will help. Thank you. Did you want to share any more? No. Maybe not. No, not today. Okay, someone else. Yes.
So during this exercise, I was mainly the receiver. And I noticed as a receiver, the structure really made me have to listen very hard and actively listen. And I also made me notice normally, especially when my husband shares a frustration, I'm like ready to explain why I did what I did. But to stick to the structure, I have no room to do that. I have to really listen to him and then repeat back what I think he said, not only what I heard he's saying, but then like follow all the way through of like how that made him feel and kind of put myself in his situation instead of thinking about or justifying why I did what I did.
Beautiful. Wow. Thank you. That's the way it's supposed to work. The structure provides that. The structure, this process will work. People say, well, it didn't work for me. And then when you go through it, you realize, well, you didn't work the structure. You didn't do what you just said. Let it stop you from reacting, explaining, and actually keep listening, right? And by the way, it is a dialogue. We had one couple that was saying the frustration was coming, and there was a reaction, and so I encouraged him to just keep listening, mirroring. Why? Because it's a dialogue. Because when you finally empathize and you see your partner, you say, "Oh, it makes sense. I didn't agree with her. I didn't see it. She had no idea my reality. She had no idea how I was experiencing this. But now that I see her, gosh, that makes sense." And I can see how hard that was for her and how that connected with childhood deeper than I thought. And then it's time for me to talk. Is this a good time to share my perspective? The first three things out of your mouth were things that I didn't feel were true. So what I hear you saying is the first three things out of my mouth were things that I didn't feel were true. Did I get it? Yes. Is there more about that? Yes. And when I feel falsely accused, what that does to me is see how it goes? So that everyone gets to share their meaning. Put your meaning into the pool. And then what happens is, let me just close with this one thought. When you start to mirror, you start the process of differentiation. Differentiation is when you break out of symbiosis. All of a sudden, you're hearing something that's different from the way you experience things from your perspective, and you're not reacting. And as that difference grows, then validation says there's two separate realities can be in the same space and feel safe. And here's the thing, you cannot genuinely connect without that differentiation. Because any connection you have is romantic fantasy, or it's only there until the next objection to difference, the next conflict. And that's why we're so frustrated. We don't have a stable connection. It's this differentiation process that enables the connection to be stable. But you got to grow in it. So here I'm going to leave you with this thought. There's a section on personal devotions and sharing devotions. We'll deal with that next week, okay? But what I want to do is ask you to share 3 appreciations a day for each other. One thing I appreciate about you is you made me coffee this morning. One thing I appreciate about you is you stopped to help me, what you were doing to help me with this. So share 3 appreciations a day. And the second thing I want you to do is take this couples dialogue here on page 6 and practice it 15 minutes every night. Just before you go to bed, just practice it. It doesn't have to be a frustration. It can be one thing I appreciate about you is, and when I experience that, I feel, and what that reminds me of when I was little is, it can be a frustration, but practice it. I like one couple over here said, we started with something really easy because we wanted to get the tool down. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. Just learn to mirror, learn to validate, and learn to empathize, and you'll be on your way, okay? 15 minutes, and then finally, I said that was all, but for next week, last week you guys did the love languages, right? Well, this next week, we're going to, we'll deal with this stuff. Okay. So the caring behaviors exercise you see there on the last page, I want you to fill that out this week. And what it says simply is the objective is to share specifics about what makes you feel loved and cared about. And so what you do is you just, with each item, it could be things you used to do but don't do anymore, things you do now that I'd like you to continue, or it could be things that you never told your partner that make you feel loved. And just start telling those things. And then there's some guidelines as to how to use it. But what I want you to do first is fill this out and bring it next time. If you forget, that's fine. We'll have a little time to start it. But we're going to do a dialogue based on this. And what this does, it takes what you learned about love languages last week, and it makes it a little more specific. One thing that makes me feel loved and cared about is when you give me a back rub. One thing that makes me feel loved and cared about is when you want to spend quality time with me. One thing that makes me feel loved and cared about is when you help me with the household duties around the house. So you can see the love languages reflected, but it gets very specific. So that's your assignment for next week. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this time. Thank you for each couple. Thank you that you love marriages. It was you who created the marriage. And Lord, thank you that you have instructions and tools for us to make our marriage all that you want it to be. We give you thanks today. In Jesus' name, amen.